Welcome, my dear listeners of the macabre, to the sinister embrace of our October horror episodes. Tonight, I beckon you into the eerie realm of skin-crawling dread as we unveil spine-chilling tales sourced from the darkest corners of Reddit, where unsuspecting souls have crossed paths with the malevolent forces known
as Skinwalkers.
I must confess that I usually shy away from stories that entangle with these unholy entities. The mere utterance of their name could invoke their wrath, drawing their attention to the very essence of your being. It is said that once you acknowledge their existence, they, in turn, acknowledge yours. A horrifying connection binding you to the unknown horrors that lurk just beyond the veil of reality. But tonight, we'll dance with the devil in the pale moonlight.
Dance with me?
Should you be unfamiliar with the horrors that lurk within the shadowy lore of Skinwalkers, consider yourself fortunate, for ignorance may be your only salvation. Well, until now. However, before I plunge you into the abyss of today's narrative, allow me to impart upon you a grim understanding of what a skinwalker truly is. The Navajo people, also known as Diné, have a deep-rooted belief in magic and shape-shifting, with the skinwalker standing out as one of the most widely recognized examples. The origins of the skinwalker mythos are shrouded in ambiguity, yet they are generally described as malevolent witches possessing the ability to alter their form. The ominous capabilities of these beings are encapsulated in the Navajo phrase Yi Nad Lushi, translating to, "With it, he goes on all fours." According to some narratives, skinwalkers were once healers and medicine men who succumbed to corruption due to their own power, turning to evil. Alternatively, it is believed that social transgressions and the violation of tribal taboos can transform an individual into a skinwalker. Skinwalkers are often envisioned as fearsome coyotes, wolves, or bears, possessing immense power. However, according to widely circulated lore, a bullet or knife coated with white ash might be effective against them. To become a skinwalker, a person, be it man or woman, must commit a grievous act, such as the murder of a family member. This act grants them supernatural abilities, enabling them to transform at will from a human into an animal. Commonly, they choose forms like coyotes, wolves, foxes, or bears, although their shape-shifting capabilities extend to any animal. To achieve this transformation, they wear the skin of the desired animal, thus giving rise to the name Skinwalker. The specific animal they choose depends on the task they intend to accomplish. For instance, they might adopt the form of a bear to acquire great strength. Without further ado, let's delve into the first story. Tap, tap at the window. From Redditor Navajo Joe. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up chopping, gathering firewood for my grandmother because it was getting dark. Driving back on a dirt road at about 30 miles per hour, give or take 5 miles per hour, I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window, passenger side, my uncle quickly shouted, "Don't!" I completely froze. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest, then completely stopped when I heard a tap, tap on my window. My uncle sped up and was loudly praying in my native language. I didn't know what was going on and thought it was over till our truck suddenly dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying,
"Look at me,
and
don't turn away."
over and over. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, but from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe, and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed, and the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around and sighed. It was quiet besides the truck and the road. He looked at me and said, "We will ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so the evil will forget our faces." Navajo to English equivalent. I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the radio, watching the time, listening to my uncle sing an old prayer till we got to my grandmother's house. I called my uncle because I had a nightmare about that night. We talked about it for a bit. He said, "I didn't see faces, just eyes, like brake lights you see on the road. It watched you." Navajo to English equivalent. Before hanging up, I tried joking with him about it. "Why didn't you just step on the brake when it was in the back?" No laughter, just a pause. "Because it wasn't alone." Don't get off the bus. From Redditor Iron Jesus. Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has either probably heard of some creepy things or have experienced pretty creepy things, namely skinwalkers. I have only seen one. Here is my story. I come from a small town in northern Arizona that's sandwiched between the Paiute Reservation to the north and the U.S.'s largest Navajo reservation to the south. My high school being so small, a 1A high school that has, on average, 80 students enrolled every year, always had to travel south about 5 to 10 hours one way to play another high school in any sport. This means that we traveled a lot on the Navajo res. And we also usually stayed at hotels when we would head out to play and come home in the morning. But this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school didn't have enough money to put up the teams in a hotel that trip, so we were going to be on the road for a total of about 12 hours. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season. We had just got done playing our game and headed home on our bus, Big Blue. We were headed out, and it wasn't long, about 2 hours of driving, before we had entered the res. By this time, everyone was asleep, with it being about 2 in the morning. When we had crossed the reser's border, I noticed the bus driver had sped up and was now going about 85 miles per hour. I thought this was a little weird because he never exceeded the speed limit, at least not in my high school career. For some reason, I couldn't fall asleep like the rest of my teammates, and I just sat at the back of the bus staring out across the desolate desert landscape that was lit up by the full moon. As I looked out, I could see a figure running towards the bus at an angle of pursuit and keeping up with the bus at 85 miles per hour. As the figure got closer, I saw that it was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, it looked exactly like a human, only that the face was painted half black and half white with glowing eyes. Glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, "Holy crap, it's a skinwalker." The skinwalker ran up to the edge of the road and just kept up pace with the bus, hurdling sagebrush and rocks while staring at me. After I made eye contact with the thing,
I could not look away.
it was as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. The skinwalker just smiled at me, this inhumane smile that went ear to ear, showing crooked, yellow, pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up, and I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumple down onto all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could see his bones crack and reform. Hair started appearing all over the skinwalker's body, and in about 3 seconds was now a coyote, and it ran off back into the desert, out of view. As soon as it was gone, I ran to the onboard bathroom and puked a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear they would think I was crazy. I confided in my Navajo friend. She told me that I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next school day in the parking lot. He just came up to me and mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter-like thing, turned around, got in his truck, and drove away. To this day, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact I moved away from that town and and if I do have to go south, I go around, way around. Convinced I saw a skinwalker. From Redditor Nordic Alchemist. As many of you might already know, many Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed to attract their attention. Well, I, however, grew up away from the Navajo Nation and was very naive about the subject. When it came to skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell a story of how back in the 80s, when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, still in Shiprock, but the southern outskirts, about how she and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a street light. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur, a twisted noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with a soft burnt orange glow. Me, being my own close-minded self, doubted every word, but I never said my doubts aloud. But these doubts totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house last October. Me and my family had just finished scouring the carnival at the Navajo Nation Fair and called it a night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in just 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, it was about 9 at night, where we stayed up until about 2, catching up about family affairs and the local news. It was during that time that I just decidedly opened my mouth and blurted out the question, "Hey, are skinwalkers real?" "Guys?" I asked. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandma said with almost a disturbed yell in her voice. So she and my grandfather both decided to go to bed. After being scolded by my mom, one of my aunts chimes in with a very cautious tone and says, "They're real, all right. Had a few start screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had nightmares the whole night and woke up crying that morning." Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all decided to go to bed. Now, the trailer home is pretty old, and it was a really nice night, so we slept with the windows open with screens to prevent bugs coming in. Everyone had drifted off to sleep except me, because my mind was still going a million miles a minute about skinwalkers and wondered if I would ever encounter one while here on the reservation. As a kid, I was told it's taboo to think about skinwalkers because it can still call their attention. That's when shit totally hit the fan. Just as I was settling and finally getting relaxed for sleep, I started to hear something moving outside. I get up from the couch and start wandering over to the kitchen window. In the trailer, all of the rooms have the lights out, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch light out front. I was thankful for this because I told myself if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. So I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove along with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything, so I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed, thinking it was just a stray cat or something. Only have taken 2 steps, I hear what sounds like a distorted scream coming from outside. Definitely close by. Fear rising, I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure was staring at my direction from behind the cars, just outside of the reach of the porch light. Only it looked awfully wrong, and gave off an evil vibe just from seeing it. It was gray with very disheveled hair, and a horrific orange-red soft glow came from its eyes. I noped the hell out and ran back to the bedroom. It was at this moment I had begun to also notice an awful stench in the air that smelled like rotting meat. I started trying to wake up my mom, who was like, "Oh my God, it's almost 3 a.m. What do you want?" I immediately began in a shaken voice, "There's something scary outside." Then she said, "Ugh, it's probably just a stray animal or something. It's the res. Animals wander all the time at night." She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was saying, so I screamed, "There's some Blair Witch Project shit going on outside, Ma!" That got her attention. "What? "What the hell are you talking about?" she said. Then we heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful like screams and started what sounded like thrashing outside on the ground. "Hear that? That's what I'm talking about." So both her and I got back up, looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. It walked with an odd limp and dragged its back right leg as if it was handicapped. We could hear it start to scratch against the door and make this odd muffled moaning sound. My mom went and got my dad, and they both started shouting in Navajo all sorts of words, telling the thing to go away and say it's not welcomed here. Well, all this commotion was enough to get the rest of the trailer up as they came out into the hallway. The only thing my mom did was turn to them and said, "Skinwalker," while proceeding to point to the door. Noises still happening. Apparently, they already knew exactly what to do, as my grandfather got out a handgun from a drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun and went straight to the door. Yelling out more Navajo that was too fast for me to comprehend, he swung open the door and fired twice. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. "That's the fastest one I've ever seen," said my grandpa. Next thing you know, my aunts and my parents were freaking out about what just happened, saying stuff like, "What if it comes back tomorrow?" And "It saw us. Does that mean we're targets now?" Afterwards, my grandparents calmed everyone down, myself included, saying we'll be fine, and we all went to bed around 3-ish. Morning comes, and my grandparents call one of their neighbors and explain to them what happened. Apparently, one of them was a medicine man who used to partake in Ye Bi Che, Navajo ceremonies used for healing and curing sickness, and came over to bless each family member and the grounds outside. I hope you enjoyed these Skinwalker stories. I've decided to keep the best for last, so tune in next week, Tuesday, for our last installment of creepy stories from the depths of Reddit. Until then, stay safe, my ghoulish fiends, and if you happen to look out the window and see two glowing eyes staring back at you, get on your knees and pray.